Are you an AI guy?
I'm an AI guy who's like deeply concerned about AI. I think I'm on that side of it rather than like the AI guys who are magic bullet AI guys. So I would say there's that distinction, but yes, I am in the camp. I am a user. It's a daily thing at this point.
It's so nice having somebody that's on my side a little bit more with this. Oh my God.
Yeah, he said he uses it every day though. Okay, Amber?
You know, I ran out of usage credits for Claude earlier today. So like, come on, like same, but different, you know? So anyways.
Go ahead. Let's do the intro, then we can get into all this stuff.
Perfect.
Alert. AI advancing. Misinformation spreading. Brand systems compromised. Crisis mode activated. Welcome to Control Alt PR, a podcast hosted by Erick Grau and Amber Krasinski, where PR, marketing, cybersecurity, and tech finally sit at the same table because most problems happen somewhere in the gaps between them. If you're looking for expert advice on how to handle AI and real conversations about its potential, consider this your hard reset.
Welcome back, everybody, to Control Alt PR. It's a podcast that you have known and come to love, where we talk all things technology, marketing, and the intersections between them all.
And today's episode is for anyone who's ever looked at a perfectly good corporate dashboard or maybe a standard spreadsheet right before a crisis hits and wondered, how the hell did I miss that? Huh?
Our guest today is somebody that can help talk through that exact thing, you know, instead of looking at things from a very static point in time. Evante Daniels is here. He's the founder and lead researcher at SEEQER, which is a predictive behavioral research firm.
We were just talking about this last week. We're talking about earlier today about it. We're very excited about this episode. It's funny because I'm an MSP, right? So we're in the IT world and we deal with Power BI dashboards and we deal with all this other crazy stuff and all these metrics and all the sources coming from all these different points. And this is what you do, right? You design data systems that track like real world conversations, human behavior, and how to map it out and how does it shift the public attitude and the, where it's going. Like, I'm excited about this. This is actually really good. So, I'm excited about all. Fair to all the guests, but this is more on my realm of data and geeking out. So sorry, Amber. We typically have the marketing people, and this is more of data. I like data. Yeah.
Back on that, because Evante, I feel like bridges that gap between both of our worlds. Like, you got Q, which felt very Star Trek to me when you first were talking to me about it, Evante. But it's basically like this it's like a wicked cool live tracking data system, and it monitors all these different channels and industries, and you can pull things, and it really helps, even just some of the examples you've shown me. It's like leadership across the board in all these different areas can really catch some of those hidden risks and, gaps that they might be missing that they haven't even thought of yet. I think what really fascinates me about what you work on is that it is like so present based, and you can kind of do some predictive, like what's coming down the pipeline stuff. So yeah, we can get into it a little bit.
Let's dig in here. Let's get in.
How did you become a LinkedIn personality? I want to know that. No, I'm just
kidding. Well, the LinkedIn thing is, I can tie it all together. Just like, let me place these pieces real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I come from working in marketing and strategy, really marketing for the last 20 years. And I was in Louisiana before COVID, working in nonprofit. And the fun thing about working nonprofit and marketing is that it's very different from corporate or startup because you have no money and you also have no people and you also have no time. And so you're just doing everything, but the standard of conversions of actually cost per click is probably felt at a more real level than you do when you're working in these other organizations and you have the budget to correct it. So I was working in that space and I opened my big mouth and it was COVID and I happened to say like, hey guys, we were working in community development and in the grants. I don't think that we should put in the cost to actually upgrading our organization to be able to go into these schools during this time. I think we should just trust this other larger organization that's already done all the paperwork to handle our grants and like actually go into the schools. I was like, this is just, I don't see why we should pay if they already are willing to help us out on this. And they're like, that's great. That also removes your job. And so that was
my
March. That was March of 2020. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, great. That's, once again, I've shot myself in the foot in the most creative way possible. And so I was like, I got to find a job. And everyone in marketing was looking for a job in 2020. And so I did like 1,000 applications while also doing like video work out in the community and completely like just being out there and doing what I could. And while I was doing that, I did a video of myself, like essentially job interviewing myself. And like it's still somewhere on my account, but like it went like small viral during that period of time. Someone at LinkedIn gave me 6 months of LinkedIn Premium because he saw the video. And that allowed me to find a job in tech where they saw the video and they're like, could you do this again? And I was like, yeah, I could absolutely
My
do it again. I could do
God.
it better. Like there are so many things I wanted to do better. So that started my engagement on LinkedIn. And then I moved to San Francisco, right? And so I came from a community where everybody was like, what's your Instagram? And suddenly that question changed because in San Francisco, they go, what's your LinkedIn? And so
Absolutely.
I just gotten this job from LinkedIn and I was like, oh, okay, LinkedIn's over with, I did my thing. And then now I'm in a community where I was like, oh, what are you doing on LinkedIn? And so I was like, well shit, now I've got to I got to show up here. I don't know anything about tech at this level. And now these guys are on a whole different platform. So I got to learn this platform. And so what you see now is like, after 6 years of me looking at the patterns of LinkedIn and like how it actually works, what builds community there, what builds networking, and knowing that it matters when I go talk to someone in San Francisco that they see that like, oh, he has this many amount of followers and he's doing these things and he's showing up in this way. And so that's why I'm on LinkedIn as much as I am. And then now it's our top of funnel, right? Like business wise and business strategy wise. This is where most of our business engagements come from. This is where most of my relationships come from. And so it's become the community that I think a lot of us have found there. I think I represent the exact demographic that they want to celebrate on that platform of builders who build in public and acknowledge when they're wrong. And like, that's the whole thing of like running a research firm. You can't be arrogant and saying, well, here are the 5 things I learned about, working through my July 4th holiday weekend. It's like that's not what the platform exists for, even though that's what it fills up with.
No,
So let's talk about
definitely.
your platform,
Yeah.
platform Q, right? So it monitors global information across dozens of industries.
74.
Okay, that's a lot of industries. And how many countries?
195
In real time.
in real time. Yes.
All right. So when you're looking at this data, you're tracking it. How do you catch that little subtle trend, that risk, that the thing that makes your platform, Q?
Everything is contextual for us, right? And so even in how we look at data is contextual. We have over 14 macroeconomic factors that we're tracking all of this data through. And so it's not just like what happens through the news, because that's RSS feeds and parsing that data and being able to categorize that. And there are some fantastic systems that one day I would love to be able to integrate into our own that do it better than something we could ever do from the gate. But what we've done is essentially kind of copy the mechanics of cell phone triangulation with macroeconomic factors. And so it allows us to say like, oh, okay, this industry is extremely sensitive to this thing. And it may be something that falls into food prices. And just based off of historical economic data, when food prices shift or they go up, this industry starts moving like a butterfly. It starts doing all this crazy stuff. So how can we track that? And so we've done that not just for those industries, right? But then being able to essentially build a matrix out that says, okay, let's take the sensitivity of that industry and apply it to the sensitivity of the geography of those 195 countries. And then even to do one more, we go and let's apply that to the 300 ethnic groups that exist across the globe. And then that gives us this real-time number, right? To say here is almost a thermometer of the ambient stress that's impacting this person around this concept, around this area in the economy, right? So for example, when we're looking at food services or we're looking at, I'm thinking about the seafood industry. But like when we're looking at this stuff, rather than saying like, okay, well, let's look at everything that's happened in the fish industry. We could never know everything that's happened in the fish industry. We can never know everything that's happened in all of these places, but we can understand that if like you touch the string at like as upstream as possible, right? That the downward effects end up impacting us and end up kind of running in parallel to health indicators, to sociological indicators. And so for us, it's never about the causation. And I always tell people that with our data, like we're not saying that like what we're seeing is causing what we're paying attention to, but it gives us a direct correlation to what is happening. And we're able to track that over those 26 years. And when we can see those correlations consistently, then we start having something that becomes predictive.
All right. So what are we seeing right now, Evante?
This is Q. This is our predictive behavioral intelligence terminal. This is where we start to understand ambient stress and how it's impacting consumers' willingness to spend money or employees' willingness to show up every day. And so right now we're looking at two industries. We're looking at the use case here is a seafood brand. And so they are both impacted by what happens around food products for consumers, as well as consumer staple distributors like Walmart or Publix, and how people are going to feel in those spaces. What we're seeing on these charts is two lines. One is this purple line down at the bottom, and that's the United States overall consumer resistance to engage, right? And then we have the white line, which is above it because it's more severe, is directly around food products themselves. And so just off the base, what we're able to see here is that, yes, while things are tense for people in the US when it comes to overall spending, they're even more survivalist focused and more resistance to change around what they're buying food wise. Now,
Wow.
that's not just for one industry, right? We're making a lot of overalls here. And so when we're working with a brand, they have different consumer groups, right? So they may be focused on millennials or Gen Z. And we're able to see that, hey, these groups are processing this a little bit lower of a stress point than other generations are, which is important to know, especially for your buyer group. Now, say if they want to expand into Gen Alpha because they are asking for food, well, that's a very different shape.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so they're able to see here that one, Gen Alpha was survivalist even when other generations were moving out of pragmatism. And that
Can
they
I see X just because,
yeah,
I'm X?
absolutely. Got you.
All
So
right.
X is here in the middle here.
Yeah.
And look, we can take off the overall and kind of zoom in a little bit so we can really see there that in a moment of stress, it makes a big difference
Wow. Makes
of
a
how
huge
people are
difference.
feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can see for each one of these generations, right? For millennials that are moving towards survivalists, they're going to have their community instincts activated. Employers who show genuine care are going to retain those loyalties, brands that do the same thing. For Gen Z, though, they're going directly to peer networks, even if it's not immediate community. Now,
Why
I
Gen
love
is
it.
X,
that?
Gen X is, I love it. It's latchkey kid. I was a latchkey kid. It's exactly what we do. We don't panic. We prepare.
right.
That's
So
it.
that self-reliance kicks in. And so if you're speaking to one of these groups today and you're assuming that they're all going to receive that post the same way or that message the same way, it's not inherently true, right? And so we're able to go back over, a year to even going back to 2001 and showing this data not just for food products, but for oil and gas, building products, and giving you that comparison ability.
That's insane.
You see why my jaw dropped, Erick? Like this is even, I mean, I'm not necessarily like the data girly to end all data girlies, but when I saw this, I was like, you can predict so many things and draw so many conclusions and inform so many decisions potentially.
Well, that's
And then-
why Evante makes the big bucks, and we're here interviewing.
Hell yes.
So that is Q. That is what our first, this is our
phenomenal.
first model. This is the second version of our engine. We're always going to continue to improve the accuracy. There was a monumental jump in accuracy between Q version 1 and Q version 2. And so it's been really exciting for us to even have to shape our research and our questions based off of what we're really seeing over time.
Who are your competitors that you take seriously?
There are a couple that are out there, but I don't really take them seriously. They're more coming at this from a lens of social intelligence, not macroeconomics. And so for us, we're like, there's a whole level under social intelligence that you're not touching yet. And if you don't touch that, then we don't really take you as competition.
Zooming out for a sec. You started as a creative and a marketer. How did you make that shift from, being strictly in like community engagement, like marketing, creative? How did you land in this world of data? And then more importantly, like how do you get all these data purists really thinking about human culture and how it's like structural and all that jazz?
Yeah,
Data purist. Wow.
those are hard questions. The first one, I mean,
I like hard questions.
I know you do. I would say that honestly, it's the first time I got in tech was working at a job board. And for people who don't know, on the back end for a job board, it's a marketplace, right? You're working for both consumers and employers. And while their dynamics are shifting, they're both separate areas of focus. And I was responsible for go to market. They were like, "Can you run Facebook ads?" During the interview, I was like, "Yeah, of course I can run Facebook ads. I've been running Facebook ads as long as I've been alive." They're like, "Can you run Google ads?" I'm like, "Oh my God, a hard question." Yes, I can do Google ads. Like, and so it never became like, can you do Google ads to do this thing? Right. And so when I got there, I was like, look, I've done, concerts and pieces like that where we actually needed to hit statistical significance in a market to even feel that like brand awareness was good enough for Shaka Khan. Like there's no, the only way that happened.
Oh my God. Shaka. It was not on my bingo card of what was going to be brought up today. But
hey, listen, I've gotten to work with who I've gotten to work with.
Yeah.
But like in working on those pieces, there was a huge translation gap, right, between the tech world and nonprofit. But when they were asking for the results, I had the results. And so, like, I think that was a later on friction point, even in working with startups and working in tech from a consultant standpoint, was that I was like, I know how to get it done. I know what it actually means to launch these ads in this market. And I know what that's going to turn into and look like. And now I have to back my way into this jargon, into this language to help make sure that this is accessible by making it less accessible. So through that though, right, in trying to understand that language and trying to communicate these things better, I did a lot of certifications. And so I got, product marketing manager certified. I was Scrum certified when that was like the big thing to do. We got through
Scrum,
yeah, I was like, look, if this is what our engineers and our product teams are talking about and breathing and using, and I've never heard this shit before, fine, I'll go take a class on it. And will I get frustrated halfway through it when I'm like, yeah, this is common sense, but like, cool. It's doing the work to understand that language so that I could communicate the same practices we learned in nonprofit. When they were like, what's life cycle marketing? I was like, well, it's the phase of the emails that we send out. And, being able to bring those pieces up in different landing pages and different touch points. And so, through that process, the language was data. And that became the hook for me to be able to say like, okay, so we need to collect this data when we have this landing page, especially if I'm handing this over to an engineer who's going to build it for me, right? It's like, it has to have these pieces on it. It has to include this stuff. Can we do more on the data side? Because yes, I already know, or I have a good inclination of what's going to be happening. But now talking with these engineers and these product teams, I need data to prove my point. And so, whether that was going to be heat mapping, whether that was going to be diving deep into user retention scores or event clicks and exactly what the user flow was going to look like and how we changed onboarding, even though I was supposed to be working in GTM, when I realized like, hey, our ads are killing it, but people aren't making it through the onboard funnel. We've got to fix this thing because people are blaming me for acquisition. And it's not my fault. Like,
of
course they're gonna blame.
Of course they are. And so I'm like, no, you're not gonna blame this on me. I now understand how to talk about this, and I'm now working with your team to fix it. And if you ask me why I'm trying to fix it, I'm trying to fix it so I can go back to doing GTM. And that being literally how those pieces kind of came together. And so even when I moved on to an agency afterwards, data was still front of mind and like, okay, what do we really need to collect here? What are we really trying to ascertain and understand? And at that point, GPT was going live, Claude was going live, right? These pieces were showing up where exactly knowing how to define data, even in a chat setting, changed everything. And so kind of using that same framework and mentality was like, okay, this is how I can write like a brief that I was supposed to be given weeks ago, but is now due tomorrow. And I need to crank out 45 pages of synthesized research and these other pieces. And at that point, it wasn't deep research mode. It was just transcribing, but knowing how to actually give it the data to do so came from those years of working in tech.
You brought up AI, which is great because it's what I eat and sleep, and sometimes I think it's replaced my wife, my dogs, my kids, everything. It's changing how every company operates, right? Internally,
Yeah.
without a doubt. Not just how they market externally, right? So anything from like, I don't know, one of the companies I consult with, just simple tests that we usually do with AI, just to get everyone going. And the hardest decision for the entire company every week, it's what to order for lunch. So they created a little platform that looked into their Grubhub and looked at all their history and it tracked all the times that they ordered and whatever, and what was good, what was not. And now nobody has to decide what to eat. They just click on a button and it decides for you, which is great. So, I mean, that being said, so in your world, when you're tracking that workforce sentiment and shifting attitudes about work, what's the biggest misread thing that you're seeing right now from leadership, not from the company itself, but from leadership?
That this is the same baseline as pre-2020. Amber, I think this is one of the first things I showed you in Q, even in our first like alpha mode, was that at that point, our data set went back to 2002. And so we could see, people's resistance to buy and how that increased or decreased over time. And when you get to 2020, there was just this 20-point gap just on the floor of it, where it just had not come back down to where it was in 2019, 2018, or 2017. And I saw it and was like, oh my gosh. One, that explains everything, that when you're talking to someone and they're just like, oh, things haven't been the same since 2020. But also for a leadership standpoint, I was like, are you making decisions based off of pre-2020 data? Are you considering this to be the same normal that it was before? When we say that this is normal, it's like, if this is normal, it's a different one. People are looking at everything from families to what they fill in their pantries to all kinds of stuff differently than they were before. And if you're saying this is the same consumer, this is the same employee, we can treat them the same way that we did before because it worked, it's not going to come with the results that you want. I'm not going to say that it's guaranteed to fail, but it's definitely not going to be a complete repetition. And so it's like,
I think there's a reset.
I think so too.
It's a reset across the board, not just marketing, IT, everything. I have different discussions with my clients, and it's about ordering computers and this and that, trying to strategize. But whatever and this is the part I have a problem with leadership sometimes, that they keep looking at the old data. I'm like, it's not to ignore it, but you can't rely on it as much. You really have to create a whole new baseline.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even for us in looking at that data, right, it was like, we can't even inherently trust the data sets that existed, because what were they measuring to begin with? Once we start looking at, oh, this is a different world, saying, well, what has existed for an extended period of time that reflects even this level of normal today? And asking like, okay, well, what assumptions were being made in statistical significance, or in this poll data, or in this economic measurement that goes back to the 80s? And yes, it may be trusted, but is it accurate? And for us, that was the main point. It's like, look, man, it doesn't matter what name is behind this financial or economic index for us. We do not care. Does it show up regularly? Does it actually accurately portray? Can we do standardized weighting off of that data? And let the brand name be the brand name. And that's put us at odds with a lot of the guys who have been doing data for much longer than us. I'm not a data guy by trade. So I came in going, what's the data that's going to do the thing that I need it to do? Not what data is the data that should be trusted in the circumstance.
But that might be better for you.
I mean, think it is. To me, I do.
Yeah.
I'm a couple of years away from 60, and I remember learning how to program in mainframes. But while there are some experiences I've taken along, I got to say, after COVID, a lot of that stuff just went out the window, because it just doesn't apply anymore. Not as like you said, you can't trust it as much as you could. So if you can't trust it, not that it's useless, but you're gonna have to work on creating a whole new, and maybe you include that data set in there, but you have to create something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And there has to be like that context too. And I think that this is where, in the marketing and PR world in particular, a lot of decisions are made off of gut instincts, or like, they try to predict behavior or outcomes, and it's like, I know my audience, I know what they're going to want. So like, when you're looking at things through this lens of we can't necessarily always go off of, old data prior to 2020 and all of that, like what are some of those blind spots that you're seeing these organizations really miss? And then, I do want to get into cultural physics because,
Yeah.
she's an academic girly. So
Well, I think the biggest
how
thing
does that play into it too?
yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing I'm seeing is a good example of cultural physics, but it's Gen Alpha. We
Mm.
were with a client a couple of weeks ago, and we were going through this training. And we do like a cultural intelligence training, helping to equip them with some of our methodology, some of our frameworks so they can apply to immediate problems. And in the middle of it, we kind of said, okay, let's look at the generations and the geographies represented in the room, just to help people understand the perspectives of these different groups. And, it was a pretty standard room. It was Gen X, millennials, and there wasn't anyone from Gen Z in the room, which I thought was fascinating. But then I brought up that Gen Alpha is entering the workforce in like less than 2 years. And you could see the learning and development manager at this like multi-billion-dollar company, like eyes just get super wide. And she was like, oh God. And I was like, yeah. And that's really weird. And at that point, we hadn't even looked at our data. Well, then I go to look at it. Where Gen Alpha sits in ambient stress is the first generational deviation, like silent generation through Gen Z. We've all been tracking together. When things are weird, we may be a little bit more sensitive to it than another one, but like we're all in the same space. Gen Alpha and Gen Beta are on an entirely different track. And so once again, it's like oh, this is another moment where if we continue to assume that this is what it's always been, that this is just another generation that's going to fall in track or in line, we can't predict how they're going to respond to, things like governance or power or authority. What we can say is that what they consider to be normal is vastly different. And because of that, the way that they're going to approach risk sensitivity, the way that they're going to approach employment over years is going to be completely different.
Why is that?
I think like one, we just look at the shit that's happened for the last 10 years and like think of that's your childhood and like
that's facts. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it's I feel so bad for the kids who are growing up these days because I'm just like, dude, you don't get a break. You don't, and then like the thing you were sold is just not panning out. And like, yeah, when we were growing up, they were like, yeah, go to college, you'll get a job. And like, that didn't work out for some of us, but it worked out for the overwhelming majority of millennials. And like student debt sucks, but like the actual image of what came out of the situation was pretty much what we were sold. This generation, Gen Z, barely got a chance. This generation hasn't, like, these kids don't even think they'll be wealthy. It's not even an aspiration point on the Pinterest board.
Forget wealthy. They don't even think they're going to own a home anytime soon.
That's considered wealthy. So if you're doing learning and development, if you're saying, oh, we onboard people every single week, then one day, one Monday out of the 52, Gen Alpha is going to be in that room. You don't know when, but you know it's coming. And you know that whatever is being presented, they're going to take it completely differently than you intended for it to be taken. Same thing for those working in press, right? There is going to be a day where Gen Alpha is driving the public sentiment and it's not far away. That usually happens when people are between 18 to 24, that they genuinely drive that conversation at a loud level. One, they're not even online like that. So how this whole thing pans out, again, there's going to be one day where a press piece goes out and the publisher on the other end of that piece is now considering the reader who only buys in print. It's good, like, and if we don't consider that space, we're going to spend so much of our clients' budgets. We're going to spend so much of our own budgets. We're going to spend so much of our own time and then think it was our fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I know my kids blame me for everything, so I'm just saying,
the blame's going to go somewhere. It's going to go somewhere for sure.
Someone is left holding the bag.
100%.
I was just looking at the news, and at some point, non-political, so I won't name names of sides or whatever, but it was on a news channel, and they were talking about all these things that the mayor of New York is doing, and and they were calling it communism and this and that. And then the younger person that was on the panel was just like, Okay, if that's communism, sign me up because he's getting stuff done. So, and now like everyone's trying to make it out to like communism is like this worst thing because I grew up with that. My family's from
Sure.
Cuba, so I know what that is. But a lot of people don't really relate to that anymore. Not
No,
the horrible side of it anyway.
no.
So,
These kids didn't grow
so
up with the Iron Giant being like their introduction to the Cold War. This is
exactly.
right. They don't remember 9/11. They're much less scared of ISIS or communism. They're more worried about how much eggs are going to cost tomorrow. And
Yeah.
when you're
Or
when
if
you're
you need to spend what
right, when
I was gonna say
survivalism is your baseline, right? Like
survivalism. Yeah.
that's
Yep.
it. And that's not where we have been. And so like what happens when survivalism is the baseline? Right? What happens to what you tell someone to dream about when suddenly it's stupid to say like, "Hey, what do you think about retirement?" Like how are you running financial services? I'm thinking like Northwestern Mutual is always asking that question. And I'm like, you're going to deal with a whole generations is like retirement. Are you imagining the day that I just don't have
Don't
to
work.
like
I just,
work?
yeah. Uh-huh. You have,
Yeah.
and you have all these people like re-entering the workforce. So yeah, so I mean, that's one thing that I'm really curious about is like, if you're like an executive or a marketer and you're trying to kind of like get ahead of the curve on some of what we're talking about, like what the hell do you do about
Well, one, you get access to our platform because
Yes.
everything else is going to be a lagging indicator. I think that's an obvious standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm not even hard selling, it's just saying that like, look, every other indicator is about last month. If you're trying to make a leadership decision, you can't rely on last month because something in the world has happened since last month and it is changing how people feel. And so you need something that's going to tell you about at least last week, preferably yesterday. And you've got to pay attention to it. You've got to spend more time reading the room than you ever did before, even regardless of that situation, because you're going to spend more time slow walking pieces that were very fast to get out. You're going to spend way more time saying, what's the tangible next step? Or how do we move them from point A to point B? And understanding that you may be taking several foundational steps back just because you don't feel confident in the build going forward. And when things are at this precariousness, like this level where everything feels very fragile, not just
Yeah.
for employees, but for leaders, for vendors and partners, where trust factors are at an all-time high, right? This is a tough period of time. And so if you compare yourself as a leader to 2019 and pre-successes, and then you try to hold yourself to those successes, and then you turn that pressure on those around you and on your staff, you're not going to end up getting any of those successes in this modern context and may end up actually losing more over time.
Yeah, it's true. And I keep saying, when I talk about AI and things that are changing, at the end of the day, things are just changing faster now, but we've
They
kind
are.
of been here before. It's just now it's at a mass level. And the best thing you can do is keep up.
We're in a
Get
global
in,
field.
dive in.
Yeah, we're in a global field. Taking a step back. If you're in this work, unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of taking a step back. There are positions that would afford you that luxury. And I think that's part of the consideration these days that like, hey, 30 minutes on the news or reading the New York Times in the morning isn't enough anymore for me to keep up with what's happening in the world. Do I,
No, it's not.
do I want to even do this thing? And I feel like,
Some people are turning around and they're just opening up a coffee shop, and I don't
no,
blame
absolutely. And I'm like, that's what I'm
them.
like, go for it. If you don't want to, if this is not part of your work, if you don't work in meaning and all the forms that comes in, whether that be PR, marketing, communications, HR, media, all of these pieces where you're dealing with how humans see the world and how they see things. Yeah, dog, I wouldn't recommend going to go spend all the time in the news. But like if you're doing that work, you need to be in that space because this is what your users are dealing with. And it's the only way we even adapt to it. We just finished our round of research for the first half of the year for State of the Culture, which we're doing on July 29th. In doing that, so many people were talking about how the speed of culture has changed. And it's like, yes, it has. But if you look at these younger generations who are just online in their own ways, They're not complaining about the speed that culture is changing.
No, it's just us old people, you know.
Yeah, well, they're just surfing it, and it's like, yo, that's the thing, is it's a tsunami, sure, but like our job is to surf it. Our job is to find ways through it, and like we try to build tools that make surfing that tsunami much easier. But at the same time, if you don't want to surf, it's what it is.
Real quickly here for the audience. So State of the Culture, July 29th. What is it? A little bit more.
We'll be doing it live on LinkedIn on July 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. This is our twice a year briefing that we do to help people understand what led to the last 6 months they just went through and what that means for the upcoming 6 months across media, across HR, across communications and marketing, saying here are the upstream factors. You get a glimpse at our data, getting to see how we measured the last 6 months, what that looked like across key industries, as well as bringing in professional experts who have gotten to take a look at our data from an earlier perspective and are going to tell you directly what stood out to them and how they're practically applying that going forward.
Damn, dude, I'm going to sign up. Where's the event? I got to look at this thing now. I'm signing up to this one. Clear my schedule. I want to be on this. I want to hear it.
Yeah, man.
You're
doing
going to be
these.
dropping some gems. I definitely want to be on.
Absolutely. And you're going to get that look going forward. We do this twice a year so that you're always having at least somebody in the room who says, dude, you're not crazy. This is literally what's happening outside right now.
I mean, I think that's like the toughest thing when it comes to, our industry, and like Eric and I talk about it all the time. How do you have all these different mixed signals? What does it look like to define, okay, this is something superficial, this is something that's misinformation, this is disinformation, this is like an actual structural shift? How do you actually understand that so you can make better decisions or understand what the hell's going on in the world?
I think you got to spend time in media literacy. And the way that media literacy is shaped today is by consuming media. What I recommend is like a little gauntlet, honestly. The internet news channels that do the 24/7 news, if you do 15 minutes a day and you just skim through them and just kind of bounce back and forth between ABC, NBC, CBS, whatever else, and then BBC, you'll have a good understanding of what the institutions are feeling about the world. Right? If you spend 15 minutes on TikTok fast skimming and only staying for what absolutely hooks you, then you'll also understand this social side that exists outside, right, of the institutions. And so like between both of those, you get a really good understanding of like, oh, that's just what they say. Or like, this is ABC. So of course it's like a more positive take on the situation. They're a family company, right? And like, it doesn't have to be this grueling process of like, let me check this journalist and this thing. But like, if you know it the same way you know that like Pepsi has more sugar than Coca-Cola, right? And it becomes the way that you deal with it. And I think you treat them like a brand. And you say, this brand, their jeans are a little smaller, even though they say they're the same size of this other company. So when I'm purchasing, I already know I need to size up here. You have to do the same thing with content. And building that as a memory just happens by diving into it. Does it suck? Is it not always positive news? Of course not. It's the news. It's never always been positive news. And so like, it's going to be whatever's happening today, but yeah, diving into it, at least on that level. If you don't want to do global, do local, right? Either way, you're going to get the same memory being formed and that same muscle repetition being formed. And I think that that's really what helps even outside of our stuff, where it's like, we're going to dive deeper for you. We're going to continue to look at it at a much stronger glance, but there's nothing that we have that can beat you spending that time getting into it. There's no newsletter or Substack that is going to curate news in such a way that you don't have to pay attention to the brand that's serving it to you. And so you might as well just go ahead and see what the plays are looking like. Like even if that means that you have CNN on your Instagram account, like I do. I don't like it, but it's there. And and I know that this is what's coming out of Southeast United States when I see it.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting, and like, because I come from the media literacy background, and for better or worse, sometimes it drives Eric nuts. But like, all my curriculum, from before the pandemic is out the window now. And then you have all these like, AI generated video, like we've done an episode on that. And it's like, how can people in this day and age have that media literacy?
Yeah.
And be able to discern these things?
So, I mean, like, I think part of it is the practice, right? Where it's like actually seeing it. And then part of it is having a trusted baseline. You still got to have an idea of what normal is in the world. And if that happens through a group chat or a text message or a friend that you talk to, you got to have that. You can't go to the internet.
Normal.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's
normal
crazy.
these days.
These days, that the person doesn't have to be normal. Let me just go ahead and throw that
I'm
out
not
here.
normal. I'm far from normal.
I don't think any of us are, but like we got to figure out what normal is together, right? And normal is a normative, right? So it comes from multiple people figuring out shared perspective. And so, you know, like the internet can't help you figure out what normal is. It can't. It recommends things that are great, but it's not going to tell you what normal is. And so you got to
Amber, that's a soundbite.
Well,
I was literally thinking the same thing. I was like,
that's a
shit,
soundbite. That's a soundbite.
I mean, I live on.
It's going to be at the end of my emails now.
Reddit.
Yeah, Weird LinkedIn. When I came across Weird LinkedIn, I was like, oh my God, this is like, there's a space for me. Whoa, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, but to your point, yeah, like normal is like this constructed view based on algorithms. So yeah, but keep going.
Right?
That was
like
fire. Keep going.
You know, it's how it's what we consider truth. It's the same thing that it's us concurrently deciding this thing together. And like, that doesn't happen on Reddit. It definitively does not happen on Reddit, right? And so when it comes to like building media literacy, a lot of people will do the stuff where they're watching these things, but they're not either, you know, I don't know, just reading comments all the time. And that's the closest approximation you can get to it online, and it's still not the same. Or they're not talking to people. They're not sharing the links with others. So they're just letting this thing shape their mind by recency and engagement metrics, which is a terrible way to get an informed perspective of the world. And there's no real alternative other than just talking to people. That means one, having really awkward conversations. Like I warn people these days. I'm like, hey, you don't want to talk about politics with me. I'm not saying that I don't want to talk about politics. I'm saying you don't want to talk about politics with me. Let me recommend you to one of my friends or whatever that piece is going to be. And it's like, hey, look, I'm in this a lot deeper. I can tell where you're at right now. This is not going to be a good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Knowing your audience.
You know, and just being like, listen, I want you to, you know, continue to ask your questions, continue to figure these things out. But you also have to respect people's perspectives, right? Not agree with them, and like, especially when it comes to hate and those kind of things, that's not included in this whole piece whatsoever. But like, when it's talking these things through and knowing that, hey, look, if we're all getting our media from these online and these brands and these pieces and these hyper personal distributions, you have no idea what shaped that person's perspective. And if this is the first time that they are bringing it up to people in conversation, the first question is, where'd you hear that? Not how dumb are you, right? And like, that was the original question that fueled media literacy in its original form, was like, where did you hear that? And getting back to creating spaces that are psychologically safe enough for someone to answer that truthfully, that's got to be the ground rule for these conversations.
But it's just so hard now to find where that source of truth, even mainstream. I mean,
you're not going to find
you
one.
listen to CNN, whatever. They're like days to a week away from any things that I usually find.
No, and you're not going to find one, and you're not going to find one through the traditional means. The news from the state of the news is probably the slowest it's ever been. Journalism, on the other hand, I think is at an all-time peak part of the game, right? Like there's, you know, and so that means even more so that you're going to have to share stuff. Yeah, we're not all watching the same horrendous incident happen on the news in our classrooms anymore. Like that era is long gone. What happens is somebody may see something and the other people may not be aware of it. That person has a choice. They can either process it alone, come to their own conclusion, or they can bring it into community and have the conversation that they usually want to have and are trying to have by themselves. And then even the brands that have been legacy have been proven to be so slipshod recently in what they report and how they do it, that like, just because it came from a heavy institution doesn't mean that it's going to hold. You're going to have to look for multiple sources. And so you want to know that people who have different algorithms than you saw the same thing, right? Like, I think that becomes the part of comfort, is that shared perception still exists. The mechanics for it are vastly different, but the middleman being the place where of gathering and the trust in the middle of it. It's one of the reasons we built our system, was that like there isn't anyone that you can just go to and say like, hey, these guys know what's up. And really, hold them to that.
Home to it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So one thing that I love doing, because the whole reason that I got into PR, and we've talked about it on other episodes, crisis comms is one of my favorite lanes. And let's not broadcast that it's one of my favorite lanes, but I guess I'm on a podcast talking
You
about
already
it.
broadcasted it, but I agree.
You're here.
Crisis is sexy.
Fascinating. Oh my God.
So
it's
much
fun. It's fun. It's terrible. It's wonderful. It is a dumpster fire. But
yes.
We have a segment for the show where basically I call it, okay, I think I'm going to say it this time, Eric, the oh shit scenario. I like calling it. It's the teacher, the oh scenario. That was
doesn't
like
sound nearly the same.
No, exactly. We've been talking about this marketing wise, and she keeps trying to get all these like.
Well, I just want it wholesome a little bit, but it is the oh shit scenario.
You've literally said shit multiple times on this podcast already. I think we're all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
There's no bleeps on here. We're not on mainstream.
Like, why are we censoring ourselves now? That feels almost
we're
anti-brand.
We're not mainstream yet, but that's fair. Yes. That's fair. We got to stick with the brand. Right.
Yeah,
all right. So basically what I do is I give you an oh shit scenario, and you have like, what would you do in like the first 48 hours?
God.
Just kind of like thinking just on top of the dome, like what would you do in this sort of situation? Okay. So
let me put my Olivia Pope hat on real quick.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice little like bow around it that's like all mapped out with like cultural physics written on it. Okay. So there's like a big company that launches a new initiative, and there's like this super toxic counter narrative that catches fire in a couple of subreddits. Some TikTokers pick up on it. So the corporate PR team, they flag this with their pretty socialistic rules, and they drop this really rigid press release to shut it down. And it backfires big time. And then it starts creating more, friction. And meanwhile, Q has flagged this, that like, hey, hi, there's a bigger issue going on here than what's going on. What would you actually advise that brand to do? And how would you help?
We're going to the ground immediately. I want us to see like a user-generated content campaign out like the next fucking day on actually shaping the counter conversation based off of what's happening environmentally. And, kids are young. If we're talking a contractor group, we'd probably frame it around like, hey, we want you to like the actors essentially like, yo, play the game. You're their key. These are your parents that you're talking about. And work the narrative from like hey, we're peripheral to the actual situation. So we understand environmentally this much larger thing that's happening. And oh, by the way, here's this group that's actually been causing more problems based off of that. If we get enough ground game from a user-generated content standpoint, we know that where Gen Z engages is really around corruptness. If it's environmental, if it's rolling on a larger side, we can push that pretty easily without having to do much on a boosted campaign piece. Use that following to then follow it back to press, where you start running PR on that issue, referring to what you got out of your user-generated content. And by showing it happening from more niche users under 10,000 followers, you're able to say that it looks like more of an organic push on the conversation than you could have done with a much larger game.
Picasso.
Did you feed him the question?
No, that was like, this is why I love Evante. Like literally every time we yap,
I just want to say
like,
you spoke very highly of him, a little too much maybe, and now he just nails it. I think he's the first person just nailed it. Like, what are you thinking? You already had it in his
literally
head.
Here's what we do. No, I love this because this is so true. I think like one of the things that big, and I was just talking with like a new client, for IB Hill about this. You don't have to go to like a huge influencer. And in fact, like, you have like Charlie XCX saying like the world of anti-marketing is coming through. I was talking with Erick about this earlier. I was like, Charlie, okay. But it's almost like creating a bubble around the brand with like trusted people. People trust Stacy down the street versus the influencer that's got 3 million followers now,
Right.
So
100%. 100%.
yeah.
And like if this was in a mid-sized market, then you would approach like a mom's group and say like, we're looking for on the ground influencers and run the same game. Like you've got to build grassroots narratives and whatever that looks like. If it's digital, if it's in person, before you get to experiential, you need fans. And that's the way that you run a narrative game, is that it's going to be based off of how people see the situation. If you can put a bubble around it, then they're not seeing it clearly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then you use all the data insights from Q to help inform to not step into it. Yeah.
Right. And like we're like, yo, you shouldn't have gotten here, but like we can definitely get you out of this situation.
Yeah. I have 2 questions for you. I actually have one that's our tradition now at the end of the closing. And then I just have one as a personal one that, from a personal level, what LLMs do you use, being the AI?
We just started playing around with Soul from ChatGPT. It's an interesting upgrade. Really disappointed with Anthropic right now and their current processing levels. So we're moving our research top of funnel off of them and playing with DeepSeek a little bit more, just because.
DeepSeek in cloud, or are you hosting it yourself, local LLMs, or like how deep
we're
are
doing
you
hosting ourselves?
Yeah, good.
So we actually built our whole base directly in a VPS inside of Docker and have it running through a Postgres system over there. So it's just ingesting that way.
Nice. Actually, this is the conversations I like too. You see, it's all about data and how we're analyzing. And I, at some point, if you ever want to get in on AI or politics, man,
happy to always have a conversation. Amber knows I'm always down for a conversation. You name the topic and I'll bring the drinks. We're gonna have a great time.
Oh man, this is gonna be great. I love it. We like to leave each guest with a question from a previous guest, but the previous guest has no idea who you are because, quite frankly, we haven't figured out sometimes the structure or whatever. So there's no setup, there's no context, just a question.
Okay.
So the question that was left by the previous guest for you would be, what does it mean to be human?
That's a great question. One, because philosophically, we've had to fight about this a lot internally, even in building a research firm that does behavioral research. It's not about thinking, it's about feeling, and it's about experience. What makes us human is that as we go through life and as we experience the world around us, that we come to these really felt moments of understanding. And we can both realize that we're a part of an individual as much as part of something larger. And to do that in such a way that, like, yeah, we'll build stuff or we'll design things or we'll emote or we'll create, is all about that experience and all about reminding us of that feeling. And so I think that, like, to be human is to celebrate the individual while also desiring to be part of the whole.
Or global community. Keep saying it for years.
Yeah.
Everything we do, especially in your business, you see it. Something happens in one country, it could definitely affect the other side of the world within time. I used to work in hedge funds, so I always saw how things can relate.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Great. That was a good answer. That was a good answer. Not as quick as you did with the comms, but
Well, I'm not a philosopher every day, so. Am I watching crises happen on a regular basis and going, why didn't they just do this? Yeah, that happens almost every hour.
So those questions, we call them the James Lipton question. Sometimes we kind of move them around,
Sure.
What would be a question that you would leave for a future guest?
Ooh, I'm going to pull one from our current round of research that has been my favorite one to ask, is not in terms of capability, but in perceived value. What will AI not be trusted to do 18 months from now?
Depends on who the guest is. It can go all over the place.
It's a free game answer, man, but you get some really good conversation thoughts out of that one.
So, Evante, this was a wonderful conversation. So many great insights. I know that folks can find you in lots of different places, but for folks that are drowning in the data, or they have a lot of data and they're trying to explain it to other people and there's lots of buzzwords floating around, where can they find you?
fastest place to reach me is on LinkedIn. Just in all honesty, you can find me as Evante Daniels on LinkedIn. You can also go to SEEQER, SEEQER.co. And we actually have a request for custom briefings right there. So if you're dealing with a question, we get back to you the same day. We just finished a briefing where someone actually filled in that form and we briefed them that Friday. I think they filled in the form on Monday. We got started Tuesday and had a full briefing of custom intelligence
Nice.
by Friday. So um, if you're drowning, hit me up on LinkedIn or go directly through our website and we'd love to help you out.
What are some of the questions that people ask you at SEEQER?
My gosh, we always get the why. We always get why. Why did Gen Z respond this way over the last 6 months to news and media? And what does that mean going forward? Why we just finished this project with the seafood brand. So like why are people buying fish right now? Was like they're like, what is happening with tin fish? Why is it a trend? And why did this happen to begin with? We get to hear about like, oh, HBCUs are having this cultural moment. Why is that happening? What in the environment led to this time where HBCUs are having this big cultural moment? And it's always to go as upstream as possible, right? So they've exhausted their trend research where they said, oh, it was because of this video or it was because of this post, and the numbers don't add up. You know, they're going, hey, look, this isn't reaching everybody that we're talking about, or this video doesn't give me enough context. Then we say, well, yeah, because that video existed in an environment. You need to understand why the environment exists. And that is usually where people come to us, is because they're looking at the data and they're going, okay, we see what happened. We see that there was a spike here. We see there was a lot of engagement, but no one is telling us exactly what was happening around that moment to lead to the why.
Anyone wants to dive in deeper, you know where to go now. And I'll just plug your State of the Culture again live on LinkedIn July 29th, which I just registered. So I'm
Awesome.
there. And I just
Exciting.
reposted as well.
Exciting.
Wonderful.
Great.
Well, thank you so much again for coming. And, for our listeners, just remember technology can scale your messages, but it really can't replace the judgment that needs to go into all this stuff. So until next time, we will see you on Control Alt PR. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz.
Thanks for listening to the Control Alt PR podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and controlaltpr.com. For more hot takes and resources, check out our LinkedIn and Instagram. See you next time.